Hi, Year 5, more of the Ice Monster for you today, starting with chapter 31, Don't Look Round. Elsie threw her arms around the man and hugged him tight. "We did it!" she exclaimed. "Yes, I did it!" he purred. "Now release me this instant." The celebration had come too soon because the mammoth had started thrashing around inside the tank. It let out a cry, muffled by the water. "Hoo!" If they didn't get the creature out, and soon, it would drown. The professor wheeled himself over and lifted the pickaxe above his head before smashing it against the glass. Crunch. A patchwork of cracks appeared in the glass. "Hoo!" cried the animal under the water. The creature lurched forward and hit the glass with its tusks. Smash! All at once the glass fell away and icy water flooded the main hall, sweeping Elsie off her feet and the professor off his wheels. Swish! "Ah!" screamed the girl as she was hurled against the stone staircase. Doof! The professor had banged his head badly and was now lying face down in the water, his wheelchair on its side a few feet away from him. "Professor! Professor!" pleaded the girl. Suddenly the old man's eyes opened and then widened. "Whatever you do," he began, "don't look round." Of course, there is nothing like being told not to look around to make you look around. Slowly the girl turned her head. Just behind her was the mammoth, rearing up on its hind legs. "Hoo!" The instant those legs crashed down, Elsie and the professor would be dead. Chapter 32, Knocked Awake. Elsie wrenched the professor out of the way just in time before the mammoth's giant feet thumped on the floor. "Smash! Hoo!" it cried. "Why is it trying to kill us?" yelled the girl. "We just brought it back to life." "It's a wild beast," replied the professor. "It's not going to say thank you. Now, for goodness sake, help me." Elsie grabbed the old man under his armpits and pulled him up the huge stone staircase that led upwards through the main hall. When the pair were a few steps up, the mammoth spun round and smashed into the diplodocus skeleton. Crash! Elsie ducked as the giant bones came thundering down all around them. Whack! One struck the professor across the forehead and knocked him out cold. Doof! "Professor," shouted Elsie. The girl slapped the old man across the face to wake him up. When that didn't work, she dragged him further up the stairs to escape the animal. The mammoth began pacing towards them. It reached the bottom of the steps just as Elsie had managed to drag the professor halfway up. Surely the creature could not follow them up the stairs. To Elsie's horror, it could. "No!" cried the girl. Unsteadily, the mammoth rested its giant feet on the first step, then the second, then the third. Thud, thud, thud. In a rush to flee further up the steps, Elsie dropped the professor. His head hit the stone. Clonk! Normally, this would have been enough to knock someone out, but as he was already knocked out, it actually had the opposite effect. It knocked him awake. "Ouch!" he cried. "You're awake," replied Elsie. "Have I missed anything? We're still going to die. Oh no. Hoo!" The mammoth let out its distinctive cry again, with its trunk aloft and its sharp tusks now inches from the pair's faces. The creature whisked his head back as if getting ready to impale them. "Help!" cried the girl. Just then there was a mighty smash overhead. Kabang! Dotty had crashed her hot air balloon straight through the newly repaired stained glass window of the main hall. Smash! It descended at speed through the hall. The bottom of the wicker basket struck the mammoth hard on the head. Boof! Hoo! This cry sounded different, like a cry of fear. The mammoth scuttled back down the steps and across the main hall to hide under the shadow of the archway. Meanwhile, the basket landed with a thud and skidded across the floor until it came to a sudden stop against the wall. Crash! "Oof," said Dotty, as the cleaning lady scrambled to her feet. She surveyed the scene. There were the scattered dinosaur bones, the shards of glass from the window and the tank, the pools of icy water, the broken basket, and the hot air balloon made of 1,000 handkerchiefs and one pair of bloomers strewn across the floor. "Naughty mammoth!" cried Dotty. "Look at this mess. It will take me all night to clear this up." "Idiotic woman. That's the least of our troubles," interrupted the professor. "The beast has tried to kill us. Isn't that right, Elsie?" "Elsie?" The professor looked over his shoulder, but the girl had gone. "Elsie!" he called. "Elsie!" Unknown to him, the girl had made her way over to the archway to take a closer look at the mammoth. "Keep back, you foolish child!" shouted the professor. "Shh!" shushed the girl. "You're frightening it." "Whatever you do, don't touch it," shouted the professor. The brave little girl ignored him and reached out her hand to meet the creature's trunk. It was the only part of the mammoth that was not hidden in the darkness. First its trunk performed a little dance around the girl's hand like a snake being charmed. Then Elsie held out her hand flat, and something magical happened. The prehistoric met the modern. The two touched. Chapter 33. What's in a Name? "It's beautiful," whispered the girl. Little by little, Elsie was gaining the creature's trust. At first, a hand only touched the end of the mammoth's trunk for a moment. The animal would retreat before the girl would try again. Then, as gently as she could, so as not to startle it, she began stroking the fur on its trunk. The animal pressed against her a little. Elsie took this as a prompt to continue, so she started doing longer strokes, branching out to pats on its cheeks. The animal recoiled. Elsie realized her hand was too near the mammoth's eye, so moved it further away. She even tried a tickle under the chin, because stray cats are always like that. Just like the stray cats, the mammoth purred a little. Behind Elsie, the two grown-ups were edging closer to take a look, the professor back in his wheelchair and Dotty pushing him. Neither one could believe their eyes. "It's extraordinary," muttered the professor. "There's a special connection between them." "Like me and my favourite mop," added Dotty. "I think it just misses its ma, that's all," whispered the girl. Then she spoke to the mammoth. "Don't you worry. I'll look after you. I promise." Although the animal couldn't understand the words, it did understand the feeling. Elsie spoke in soothing tones, and, with all the strokes and tickles too, the mammoth could sense the girl's kindness. "This is history being made," boasted the professor. "History all about me, the greatest scientist of the age, nay, of all time." Dotty rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. I, and I alone, have brought the dead back to life. I am the real-life Dr. Frankenstein, and this is my monster." The professor lifted his hand to touch the mammoth. Instantly the creature retreated into the darkness. "It's not a monster," replied Elsie. She slid under the mammoth for a quick look. "It's she, and she's not yours. She's not anybody's. We've set her free." "I don't care if this thing likes me or not." "It seems awful calling it a thing," chimed in Dotty. "She needs a name." Elsie and Dotty thought for a moment. "Woolly," exclaimed the girl. "You can't call it Woolly," replied the professor. "Why not?" asked Dotty. "No, no, no," scoffed the man. "It's boring, far too obvious. It's like calling a dog Doggy." "That's a good name for a dog," replied Dotty. "I wish I'd thought of that. I called mine Catty." "Heaven help us," said the professor. "Well, let's vote on it," steamed in Elsie. "Women don't have the vote," snapped the man. The girl grimaced. "No, not yet, no. But we can vote on this." "How?" he asked. "Because I say so. Now hands up if you want to name this mammoth Woolly," said Elsie. The two ladies put a hand up each. "Looks like you're outvoted, Professor," sniggered the girl. "Darn and blast!" he thundered. "Well, what did you want to call her?" asked Dotty. "I wanted to name it after me." "Well, that's a surprise," mused the lady. "The Professor?" asked Elsie, her face screwed up in confusion. "No, no, no. The Professor Osbert Bertram Cuthbert Farnaby Beverly Smith Mammoth." "That's a mouthful," remarked Dotty. "No, it would take too long to say. She's called Willie, and that's that." "Not fair," he snapped. "And don't try and touch her, Oswald Barnaby Custard Beatrice, whatever your stupid name is. She doesn't like you," said Elsie. "Willie! Willie!" The girl held out her hand again, and slowly the animal's trunk uncurled out of the darkness. She touched the tip and ran her hand down it again. "She must be peckish," remarked Dotty. "I'd be peckish if I'd been asleep for 10,000 years. Shall I make her a nice cheese and pickle sandwich?" "Mammoths don't eat cheese and pickle sandwiches," snapped the professor. "Ham and pickle?" "No, they don't have ham and pickle either. They don't have any type of sandwiches. Sandwiches weren't invented until 100 years ago." "All right, brain box. What do mammoths eat, then?" pressed Dotty. "They are herbivores," replied the professor. "Herbie who?" spluttered the lady. "Grass, leaves, plants, and lots of them." "Well, we'd better get back to the park then," said Elsie. The professor shook his head. "We can't take this creature outside into the world." "Why ever not?" asked the girl. "Because it belongs in a cage." Chapter 34. Cage. "A cage?" exclaimed the girl. "You can't put Willie in a cage." The mammoth must have picked up on the conflict between the two humans and hid behind Elsie. hid as much as a mammoth can hide behind a little girl, which is not very much. Yes, a cage. It's the safest place for the dangerous creature like this, he replied. With that, he wheeled himself over to a spot near the main entrance to the hall and pulled a lever. The trapdoor opened and a huge metal cage rose up out of the floor. Clunk, clank, clink. The noise echoed around the hall, causing the mammoth to move further away into the darkness. With a huge thud, the trapdoor closed. Look, said the professor proudly. I have food and water for the beast in there. He indicated 2 troughs on the side of the cage. It's barely bigger than she is, protested the girl. It will be safe in there. Trust me. Elsie was glowing with fury. I don't trust you one bit. That wasn't part of the plan. Did you really believe I would set this 10,000-year-old creature free to roam the streets of London? But For once, Elsie was lost for words. Dotty stood by her side. All this girl wanted to do was set Willie free, she exclaimed. The monster is free, began the professor. Free from the ice, free from the grave of history, free to live out the rest of its days in this cage, but it won't be free to see her. Oh, no. I'll be able to open my very own prehistoric zoo, the only one in existence. I'll be able to charge a fortune, £100 a view. People will come from all over the world to see the monster. You're the monster, seethed Elsie. I would never have done this at all if I'd have known this was your plan. I assumed as much, child, which is why I thought I would keep this part of the plan a secret until you outlived your usefulness. Thank you, and good night. You may go. You can't do this to us, yelled the girl. I just have, was the reply. The professor rolled himself across the hall to the cage and pulled out a handful of grass. He shook it in his hand. Come on, Professor Osbert, Bertram, Cuthbert, Farnaby, Beverley, Smith, Mammoth. Dinner time. The mammoth did not budge, and the professor's face soured. From a leather pouch on his wheelchair he produced a pistol. Maybe this will persuade it, he said as he pointed it at the mammoth. Elsie stood in front of Willie. You'll have to kill me first, she said. Chapter 35. Eternal Sleep. Oh, and me, added Dotty, taking up a slightly safer position right behind the girl. Why would you bring this beautiful creature back to life only to murder her? Demanded Elsie. This gun fires darts, not bullets, replied the professor. They're tipped with a powerful sleeping drug that can knock an elephant out in seconds. And what about a person? Asked Elsie, feeling more than a little frightened. The professor smirked to himself. It would put a human being to sleep forever. So you're going to kill us until we're dead? Asked Dotty. That doesn't really make sense, but in short, yes, he replied, now pointing his pistol straight at her. You evil, evil man, said the girl. Thank you, he replied. If you have to kill me, so be it, said Elsie. Willie can't be kept in a cage for the rest of her life. You can't stop me, child. Maybe I can, said Dotty. The lady reached beside her for what was left of the hot air balloon's basket. With all her might, she shoved it across the floor to the main hall towards the professor. Whiz! He quickly spun his wheelchair out of the way, and the basket smashed against the wall. Doof! You'll have to do better than that, he purred. Much better. Elsie picked up one of the diplodocus bones that the mammoth had helpfully rearranged across the floor. How about this? She asked, wielding it in his direction. Goodbye forever, urchin, he said, pointing the gun at her chest. The professor pulled the trigger. Psst! Thinking fast, Elsie whisked the bone up to defend herself. The dart struck into it. Twang! Ha ha! Said the girl. Don't you worry, child. I have plenty more darts. Plenty more. Immediately he began fumbling in his pouch for another. This brought precious time for the pair. Elsie picked up one side of the balloon. Quick! She shouted to Dotty. The lady followed suit, and they ran towards the professor and threw it over him like a huge sheet. Whoosh! Get this thing off me! He yelled from underneath the 1,000 silk handkerchiefs and one pair of ladies' bloomers. Now bash him over the head with the dino bone, shouted Dotty. Elsie had never bashed anyone over the head before, and certainly not with a dinosaur bone, but there was a first time for everything. The girl rushed over and then stood beside the flailing figure, unsure of what to do next. Whack him! Ordered Dotty. Elsie did what she was told. Donk! Ow! Yelped the professor. Not hard enough, complained the lady. Yes, it was, came a muffled voice from under the balloon. Harder! Another whack. Donk! Ow! Still harder, said Dotty. No, pleaded the professor. Third time lucky, muttered Elsie. With all her might, she whacked the man over the head with the bone. Donk! This time the professor did not cry out, but instead slumped in his wheelchair. Slud. That might have been too hard, remarked Dotty. Elsie looked up at the massive hole in the stained glass window that Dotty had crashed through. The snowstorm had passed and night was slowly becoming day. "We need to get Willie out of here," said Elsie, "and fast." They looked around, but the mammoth had gone. "Oh no," said Dotty. "We've only gone and lost her." And that's it for today. See you next time.